back, ladies and gentlemen, to Higurashi. We're starting part 8, whose name I don't quite remember off the top of my head, so I'm just going to move on with things. My prediction, without having looked at the ending, I'm going to predict that they're going to somehow save Tomitake from dying. He's going to call in some military backup or something, preventing Takano from killing everyone. I don't know if Takano will die. She might die. Get shot or something. That's probably going to be the ending. The only other alternative would be like Tomitake somehow teaming up with the Yakuza and fighting off the mountain dogs, but that seems unrealistic given that they have over 100 special forces trained to do nothing but murder people. And I mean, the Yakuza are pretty good, but they're not going to beat 100. They're not going to beat 80 to 200 soldiers or more in a firefight. Special forces in a firefight. That's a little bit of a stretch. I wouldn't really believe that one, so I'm going with Takano's getting caught before she can kill Rika. Exposed and somehow prevents this. Because I don't see any way to get a reasonable amount of forces able to take on that many soldiers who are 100% on board with killing an entire village for what seems to be, at least from what we've been given, no reason. So that's probably the way things go. Let's find out if my prediction is completely wrong. Starting now. Matsuribayashi. At least let it end with a blissful dream. Well, they're implying it will end nicely, or at least that we'll be hoping it ends nicely. The riddle you've been entrusted with solving now becomes long last unraveled. What must be done to stop the chain, and what will happen in the ultimate end? It's a showdown between the conclusion you reached and the one I reached. There is no difficulty, and you should understand that now. That's fair, there is no difficulty in this game. You cannot lose this. Well, you can reach a bad ending with the mod. They have those. Everyone's entitled to happiness. The difficult part is accepting it. Everyone is entitled to happiness. The difficult part is fulfilling it. I, too, am entitled to happiness. The difficult part is working out a compromise. Frederica Berncastel. Well, that's interesting. I thought Rika came up with that herself, but I guess someone else did. This is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to actual persons or organizations is entirely coincidental. That's right, guys. The government of Japan, any resemblance to the government of Japan, purely coincidental. The fact that they call it Japan, or they say Tokyo, the city, or anything crazy like that, it's purely a coincidence that they talk about being located in the country of Japan and have Japanese cultural norms and Japanese architecture and Japanese people who speak Japanese. I mean, there's plenty of places in the world where people speak Japanese and have hundreds of years of history living there, right? The study was filled with piles of books and papers. In that study, there was a full-figured old man writing something at his desk in utmost concentration. There was also a little girl sorting out papers on the carpet. She almost looked as though she was playing with them, but the serious expression she was wearing made it clear she wasn't. I should probably, let's see. You guys want to do console art this time? We can do console art. I should also check the mod settings. It's mod settings off. That one's F1, okay. Oh god. I hate the presets. Can I not get ADV going? Interesting. They actually removed that. Alright. Thank you. Let's see what happened. Did they actually remove that? Hold up. I'm gonna, save this real quick. I'm gonna save this real quick and go to the actual settings menu on the main menu. I'm curious. I'm curious now. The mod settings are messing with me a little bit. Configuration. Mod menu. Voice matching. Visuals. Okay. Sprite style. That's original. That's Manga Gamer Remake. Okay, background is consoles. Background stretching's off. NVL. Okay. That should be good. We shouldn't need to touch anything else. It was like, it does some weird like preset cycling in F1. Get back to this. Thank you. Let's see what happened. They still have names at the top. Interesting. It might be a change to what they did. Look, there's lots of people with the same symptoms. Way higher than the national average. That's exactly what I expected. There's an intriguing treatise over here too. It discusses psychosurgery and civilization. It also predicts the existence of parasites that inhabit the frontal lobe. Frontal lobes that causes emotions. Right. Emotions aren't created by the heart. They're just side effects of chemicals secreted by the organ known as the brain. And everyone hates to be reminded of that. If parasites capable of acting on that organ did exist and spread to create a colony, the colony's thoughts would be unified. Are parasites the cause of the spread of ideology? When ideologies clash, is it because different parasites are competing to expand their habitat? That, or to expand religion? Expand national borders? To expand a race? It's hypothesized our differing cultural communities and their conflict are the result of parasites influencing human thoughts. That's an interesting hypothesis. There's people in other countries who think the same thing as you, Grandpa. Of course there are. There's countless parasites on this earth. It's well known some coexist with their hosts and some control their hosts. We've also discovered plenty of parasites that infect humans. Yet despite that, we adamantly deny the possibility that parasites could infect humans and control their hosts. I mean, you guys wanna read some fun stories about ant parasites? I've watched enough disturbing stuff about parasites in small creatures that directly control the host. Despite that, we adamantly deny the possibility parasites could infect humans and control them. Yeah, because you don't want to believe it. Even the hypothesis of such a thing. Why do you think that is? Well, humans aren't special in any way. Because that hypothesis would mean changing our views to see the spread of ideology from the perspective of epidemiology. If conflicts in ideology can be resolved through debate, then they're peaceful, but if they occur epidemically, they become frightening. If one were to say treat bad thoughts or the spread of culture as an epidemic? Think about the Black Plague in Europe during the Middle Ages. A vile infectious disease spread. They forced infected people into hospitals and didn't release them until they completely recovered, but some even died in those hospitals. Some people might have died from the Black Plague. Wow, that's an interesting way to say that. They burned their corpses, they confiscated and burned everything the patients touched for fear the plague infected it. They even suspected families of infestation, or infection, forced them into hospitals. They'd hospitalize healthy people over individual ideas? Replace an idea with a disease, the rest is the same. Patients won't be released until they completely recover. People burn everything that may have been touched by the patient. They force the patient's family to go to the hospital. People are free to do what they will, right? Thoughts aren't pests. If an idea was created by parasites, it'd be the same as a plague. In other words, an idea is like an incurable epidemic. You mean anyone with different ideas treated like they have a disease? That's right. If we bring this to its logical conclusion, parasites could be responsible for mass murders of people belonging to different races or religions, but this can be seen as justifying genocide. Therefore, talking about parasites in brains has been taboo since the war. What does taboo mean? It means something people shouldn't get involved with. That's why nobody researches these things. Nobody even remembers anything about parasites that live in the brain. We assume parasites which control humans simply don't exist. That's almost funny. How can they prove something that doesn't exist? Or prove something doesn't exist? It's impossible. Exactly. Proving the devil exists is easy. You just have to show him to someone. But you can't prove he doesn't exist. In fact, it's quite impossible to prove something doesn't exist. You can't show somebody something that doesn't exist. Proving something can be hard if you can't prove it exists, but proving it doesn't exist is virtually impossible, as you'd have to have all knowledge of everything that exists. It's almost as if the parasites in the brain are controlling people so they keep their existence a secret. Me and my grandfather shared a happy laugh together. Humans are simply another animal in this world. We might be at the top of the food chain, but it's foolish to think we're superior to others. Humans can be controlled by parasites. Just because the existence of them hasn't been proven doesn't mean they don't exist. They exist. I know they do. It's happened before in the scientific world, right? That's right. Not all scientists are recognized for their work while they're alive. There were many who were ridiculed and couldn't prove their theories to be true. But Grandpa, I hope your theory will be recognized before you die. Otherwise, it'd be so sad. Oh, don't worry. God doesn't ignore people who work hard. Yes, he does. Hard work always pays off in the end. But when will that happen? Nobody knows when God will descend from heaven. Just like you never know when you'll be robbed. So we always have to be alert and ready. So we don't miss our chance. True, true. That was something my grandfather said all the time. Nobody knows when efforts will bear fruit. For anyone who couldn't guess, that was Takano, by the way. It'll happen one day. That's why you must always work hard so you have no regrets when the time comes. Your efforts will bear fruit someday. That's what he meant. But will it happen before you die? Even though there were so many scientists whose work wasn't recognized while they were alive? It was a cruel thing to say, but I didn't mean to be cruel. I'd seen how hard my grandfather had been working, and I knew he wouldn't live forever. I just wanted his work to gain recognition before he died. Breakfast time while watching the best arc? Is this the best one? Alright. Right. Again, my expectations up. You know, of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Yep. He was crucified and resurrected after 3 days. You told me about it. And how do you think Jesus was resurrected? Did he just get up as if he was waking up in the morning? He was buried after his execution, presumably. His body was in the ground, presumably. Now, that's not typically how Romans treat crucifixion victims, by the way. Typically, people who are crucified are not buried in tombs. In fact, it's incredibly unusual, especially since Jesus was crucified as a traitor, right? Crucified as a traitor to the Roman Empire, he would not have been given a burial. And they would not have even had his body. But it's just a story. Body was somewhere on the ground, though. Did he break open the tombstone and crawl out like a zombie? No, that wouldn't be called a resurrection. The sinners who killed Jesus imagined exactly the same thing. Jesus predicted before he was executed he would come to life after 3 days. The sinners buried him, sealed his tomb, and posted guards to watch over it. But then what Jesus meant wasn't that he would resurrect physically. He meant his teachings would be resurrected. And after 3 days, his teachings were resurrected, and people regained their belief. The hearts of those who wanted to be shown the proper way revived his teachings. He got crucified because the Jews were going to riot if he didn't, and Pontius Pilate didn't want to deal with the revolt. Yeah. But the way the Romans treat people who have been crucified and what he was officially crucified with for are not great. Don't paint the picture of someone who would just be handed over to those people for burial. As I believe typically crucifixions get a mass grave? I'm trying to remember what they actually get. I haven't read that stuff. I haven't read theories about the I haven't read a lot of theories about fucking the resurrection of Christ in a long time. I just know that it would be like I just know that it would be incredibly unlikely that you would actually be given the corpse back for burial in a family tomb. The hearts of those who wanted to be shown the proper way revived his teachings. That's what the resurrection of Christ is all about. He came back to life in the hearts of his believers. Jesus doesn't exist physically on this earth, but he exists in people's hearts. In other words, that's when Jesus became an existence superior to humans. Even if it's after the author's death, as long as his work receives a fair evaluation, he'll live again. It's a great achievement. Even if my body is gone by then, my life will return and receive recognition. Does that mean you'll become a god like Jesus did? Indeed. My research will be recognized for what it is someday, and that's when I will become a god. That's why I'm not in a rush to achieve that recognition. I don't know when that day will come. God doesn't know either. But the day will come. That's why I need to continue working as hard as I can. It was very sad to hear my grandfather say his life would end one day. He wasn't ill, and he didn't have only a few years or even days left to live. But set next to the average lifespan, his remaining years didn't look like much. The only person left in my life was my grandfather. I have no clue how old her grandfather is, so this could easily be like a 50-year-old man. A 50-year-old, like a 40 or 50-year-old, yeah, I'd be like, compared to the average lifespan, I don't have many years left. It's like, yeah, I guess if you compare it to a small child, maybe. I didn't even want to consider what it would be like with him gone. Grandfather must have remembered I didn't like talking about that subject. With a tender smile, he gently patted my head. Of course, I want my research to be recognized before I die. I'll do my best. Yeah, I'll do my best to help you too. I purposely didn't mention the before you die part. I caught myself before I said it. Thanks, that makes me happy to hear. Grandfather smiled in satisfaction. Grandfire? What the heck? Alright, his research wasn't exactly outrageous. He wasn't trying to uncover the mysteries of the universe. He was only searching for the possibility that parasites could be responsible for human behavior. Nothing more than that. Nothing outrageous. It really wasn't a wild idea. We even had some leads. Hinamizawa Village, Shishibone City, in a certain prefecture. The villagers there are possessed by a powerful homesickness. When they're unable to return, they allegedly behave abnormally as if they're cursed. There are some bizarre rules in place in the village based on their belief system. When he was working with the military during the war, my grandfather noticed similarities between the people in Hinamizawa and assumed that some kind of existence was responsible for their odd behavior. He'd been researching it ever since then. In the middle of the 20th century, so I'm trying to figure out why we're going through Takano's backstory. Because the motivation, I think the motivation is that she wants to achieve immortality. Not that she wants to grant her grandfather's research the immortality it deserves. I think that's the way she went, because she was laughing about that towards the end. So I'm like feeling like we're retreading ground here, because we've already seen her. She's already like explicitly spelled out her motive in the previous arc, which is like immortality via killing thousands of people. Which, I mean, I guess you can do that, but this isn't enhancing her motive or giving it more depth, because her motive doesn't seem to have a great rationale behind it. In the middle of the 20th century, numerous strange diseases were discovered all over Japan, most of them caused by infectious parasites, and people started to pay attention to this forgotten field of study. Grandfather's research was simply one of the investigations into such diseases, and therefore he believed it would be published amongst other research and attain recognition soon. But if his research didn't bear fruit before his death, I wanted to continue it. I wanted to continue his research. My grandfather taught me, resurrection isn't something that happens physically, it's when your life's work is appreciated, and that's what he meant by resurrection. Right? Because this seems to be like the opposite of what Takano was hoping to achieve in the previous arc. So she's like saying, oh, I want to resurrect my grandfather's work, and then she goes and causes all knowledge of it and its existence to be snuffed out. That seems to be weird. Maybe we'll get another scene that explains why she wants to destroy his work or knowledge of it? Alright, that's when he'll become a god. So when my grandfather dies, he'll still be with me forever. I wouldn't have to be alone again. I'll always be with my grandpa. Our works will attain recognition, and will become gods. We shall become as gods. We shall become as gods. I think I've heard that line in Nier about 100 times, gaining eternal peace. I'll make my grandfather a god. I will become a god, and therefore will be granted eternity. We'll be together forever and ever. I was looking at the key on a keychain. The key was labeled Hen House, but the lock Eriko was trying to open didn't belong to that door. It should have opened effortlessly, at least that's what was supposed to happen. But it didn't. I noticed beads of sweat forming on Eriko's head. She was the one who came up with the idea. She was starting to panic, the rest of us started panicking too. This only opens the hen house. Let's stop, let's go back. Shh. We were supposed to be cleaning out the hen house. If they found us back here, if they found out why we were here and why we were trying to open the lock to the back door. Is this adult Takano's perspective? I'm presuming that it's Takano's perspective again. That all four of us were to be sentenced to splayed piggy. That's my assumption. No panic, Erika. Key opens this lock, right? You already tried it, right? Shut up for a minute. This is the right key. It's just hard to open, that's all. She was almost shrieking. Our hearts were pounding loudly. It was as though the sound of our heartbeats were echoing throughout the hallway. Oh, it's child Takano's? I mean, I can't tell the difference because I don't know who Eriko is. And at that point, we heard footsteps that didn't belong to a child. Oh, there you go. It's child Takano. Since they said footsteps that didn't belong to a child, so they're presumably children. Shh! Someone's coming! Three of us held our breath, but Eriko didn't hear it. She kept fussing with the lock and the key, as if everything would be okay if she could just open the lock. Eriko, someone's coming, be quiet. I know this is the right key. I'm not dreaming. I already tried it. It opened. Oh, why isn't this working? Why is it this locked open? We'd be happy. We can say goodbye to this hell. Eriko, someone's coming. Higurashi when they cry. Kai. Alright. Alright. It's a start. My father and mother died. I don't know exactly how old they were. I was too young to remember. They went shopping without me, and that must be why they were punished. It was a train accident. A terrible disaster. Well, it's unfortunate. A lot of people died in that incident. Maybe my father was one of the lucky ones. He was still alive when he arrived at the hospital. So he was able to share his final words with me. My mom died instantly. Daddy. I didn't want to admit this person I could hardly recognize was my father. As I called out to him, I hoped it was someone else instead. But, unfortunately, it was my father. Maybe I shouldn't have woken him, because when I woke him, he was reminded of the miserable agony he forgot. Daddy. He's just screaming, Daddy. He tried to move his right arm so he could pat my head, but his arm was wrapped in bandages and his hand was no longer there. I couldn't find his hand anywhere on the bed. I only had scary memories of his right hand. Its main job was to slap me when I did something bad, but I never wished it gone. Besides, that hand also patted my head. Even though it only happened a few times, it was a big warm hand and it stroked my head very gently. No matter what good deeds I did, he could no longer rub my head. No, his hand was the least of his worries. He had to go into emergency surgery. The doctors already warned me the chance of him surviving was very low. That's why I was allowed to see him regardless of his condition. Not only could he no longer rub my head, he might be gone forever. Daddy, the surgery will make you better, right? Daddy, you'll get better, right? Right? Listen carefully. Daddy might not make it. Even if I die, you gotta be strong, okay? Child Takano is so innocent. No, you get better. The doctor's gonna make you better. You're not gonna die. He was a stubborn, old-fashioned father. He believed endurance a virtue. And he never complained about anything. And that's why I couldn't believe he actually said he might not make it. I tried desperately to deny his words. But even that wish wouldn't prolong his life. My father, knowing his time was limited, tried to tell me some important things. But I interrupted his efforts by crying like a baby. I just wanted him to slap me. Just like he used to every time I cried like a baby. But he'd never slap me again. Listen well. Your mother and I lost all our family in the war, so after I'm dead, there won't be anyone left to take care of you. He didn't need to tell me that. My parents used to tell me that all the time, so I was aware of that fact. In other words, my father was the only relative I had left in the world. If I die, you can count on Dr. Takano. Dr. Hifumi Takano. Can you say it? Hifumi Takano. Right, Dr. Hifumi Takano, my former teacher. He'll help you. Daddy? 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 Many doctors came into the room in a hurry. He wanted to tell me something else, but the doctors stopped him from talking, so I wasn't able to hear him. I was kicked out of the room. I didn't know what to do. Nobody told me how my father was doing or when the surgery was going to start. He may not even make it to surgery. And nobody told me that was going to be the last conversation I ever had with my father. R.I.P. R.I.P. Takano's father. I think I asked people at the office about Dr. Takano. They asked me if I knew his phone number, and I said I didn't. And they didn't ask me anything further. Sometimes they told me they'd look into it, but nothing led anywhere. They couldn't find me a guardian, so I ended up going to an orphanage. At the time, there were plenty of orphans from the war, so although there were many orphanages around, they were all full. There were also some orphanages run by civilians. I was sent to one of the civilian orphanages, so how old is Takano if she's going to... If the orphanages are still over full, that means it has to be less than 18 years after the war, and this game takes place 40 years after the war. So that means people will leave orphanages when they're 18, typically. But let's just make an assumption. Let's assume you leave the orphanage at 18 because you're living on your own. That means Takano is at least 30 years old. I'm guessing she's at least 30 years old. She's at or around 30 years old. At lowest, she's gonna be like 30 years old when we encounter her, right? Because if it was the 60s, then 20 years would put you in the 80s, and if it was the 40s, 20 years would put you in the 60s. So I would guess she's around 30, because the orphanages are over full and not mostly empty. So I'd guess she was probably in there around the 50s. That makes sense. There was no profit to be had in taking an orphan in the first place, so I thought those civilians who were running orphanages must have been good people. I was sure they hoped that the children would grow in this loving environment. By the way, it's actually pausing midway through sentences, and enter into society with a sense of gratitude. But reality isn't so kind. How many children in this world can actually express their gratitude towards their parents in the first place? Children are supposed to be nurtured by their parents' love, and therefore, when that environment's destroyed, their hearts are wounded. She didn't look 30 plus? Yeah, but it doesn't make sense for her to be anything less than in her 20s. She's in her late 20s or 30s, right? She's also a major in the army, despite there never having been an armed conflict, so she's gotten a lot of promotions. Because you don't just start out at major. Every child has his or her own personality. Receiving affection doesn't guarantee a child will become someone angelic. But like, let's think of the timeline. Her parents lost their relatives in the war, but their parents lived. Her parents lived, and they seem to distinctly remember the conflict. But there are still tons of orphanages that are overstocked from the war, so they're not going to be overstocked for that long. They'll be overstocked for at least like 20 years. At most like 20 years before people move out. But the average age of a child isn't even 20 anyway, so... But the average age of a child isn't 2 months anyway, so... Theoretically, it should be older than that. She should be in her 30s. Based on some math. I wonder how old her canonical age is. You can probably look that up. I'll do that some other time to figure out what her actual age is. Since usually they specify on the wiki people have theory crafted her exact age. I mean, that would be my guess. She's in her 30s. Receiving affection doesn't guarantee a child becomes angelic. Not everyone's heart can be healed. Yep. And that was why there were some problem kids at the orphanage. Maybe I shouldn't call them problem kids, though. The sadness and despair of losing their parents and the anger at having to hide their feelings filled those kids' hearts. Good night, my dude. Looking forward to the early morning stream. Granddaughter, it's gonna be good. New reveals, new exciting stuff. The 7th anniversary after all. Spending time individually with the children could have solved their problems, but at the orphanage where I was, none of the staff members even tried to spend time with them or put in an effort to understand them. All they could do was make sure that the kids followed the rules, and therefore they could only see children's emotional pleas for help as problems. In this world, nobody expresses love without expressing or expecting something in return. The person who founded the orphanage was expecting something in return as well. He wanted the children to appreciate him. Well, you gotta put in some effort for that, my dude. That was why such a faint dream was destroyed by cruel reality. The children called the orphanage a prison, and nobody appreciated the staff at all. In fact, all they did was complain. That made the staff realize that love alone couldn't run a facility like that. Just like how the children called it a prison, the staff started to recognize the facility as a prison too. It was a chain reaction resulting from mistrust on both sides. Staff bound the children with rules so they could suppress problem behavior. There was a framed picture of the founder of this orphanage, but I'd never seen him in person. Was he satisfied with the pact? He put his own money into this social service? Or maybe he finally realized his dream of being surrounded by angelic children and celebrated for what he did was simply that, a dream. I mean, is he involved in the place? Is it a positive experience for them? Sounds like none of those are true, so he hasn't really put in the work to realize his dream, he's just wealthy as fuck. I don't know. There's one thing I'm certain of. Such a dream didn't exist at the orphanage. There were so many rules and several plausible standards outlined for us, but the most valued one was silence. Children's chatter tends to increase each other's volume, just like microphones drawing closer, and sometimes that leads to fights and the disturbance of order. Those children were forbidden from speaking with one another, and with those disallowed, they must have thought things would go smoothly. Alright, you're not allowed to talk, ever, in this place. That's a fucking weird rule, but alright. However, I think I always heard people's voices at the orphanage. That would be a really hard rule to enforce, even in a workplace, man. And you're asking small children to follow that? That's a hard fucking rule to get people to follow. There were two kinds of voices. One was the staff yelling, and the other was children crying. We weren't allowed to walk around inside the orphanage freely, so we never knew who it was that was crying. One time, along with the crying and yelling, we heard the noise of metallic things being smashed against each other. We knew it was a punishment, but there was no way for us to imagine what it was. We trembled, pretended we didn't hear anything, and kept working on our assignments. Ah, someone's coming in excited about the news of Proto Merlin. Yes, we're getting Summer Proto Merlin. We even skipped past regular Proto Merlin, getting ourselves a shiny, brand new Summer Proto Merlin. Take that, arcade. Summer Proto Merlin on JP. Now we just need to... And the best part about that is that that's not even the anniversary servant. We might actually get a spicier anniversary servant. A way to put one up, get one over on the arcade boys. What spicy stuff will we get here? I mean, they got Grand Riders, so we gotta get something. We're gonna have something spicy, right? Something spicy. You're on Anime Japan today because they're gonna live stream? Yeah, the live stream's happening in a while, I think. Or at least the big live stream's happening in a while. I should check. I think I still have that link. Anniversary servant hard skip for Proto Merlin. You never know who the anniversary servant is. It could be even better. That's the thing. They're trying to bait you with the Proto Merlin. But Proto Merlin's coming out afterwards, so the anniversary servant's gonna be on right up first, so you'll know if you get them anyway. Alright, keep working on your assignments. One of my roommates told me it was the casket punishment, but she didn't tell me further, and I didn't want to know either. Even if we behaved exactly the same way as yesterday, if the staff were in a bad mood, they might pick on us. Even if I didn't want to know, I might suddenly find out what the casket punishment is one day. The footsteps of a staff member were getting closer. We noticed them, so we straightened our backs and pretended we were studying. It was more important that the staff saw us doing something than rather actually getting any work done. I noticed the girl next to me falling asleep, so I poked her with my elbow. She noticed my signal and straightened her back like the others. It was almost evening. This was the hardest time for us to keep ourselves awake, and the most dangerous time. The door to our room opened and a mean-looking man showed up. He looked around to make sure none of us were falling asleep. Even if we were actually studying, if he thought we were asleep, we were out. That was why we had to make sure we appeared to be studying hard. He walked around our desks. I hoped he would just walk by me. That was what we all prayed as we kept working on our homework. The more we pretended to study hard, the more we could hear the sound of metal objects. The sound of metal objects crashing into each other along with screams. We couldn't even imagine what the poor subject of that punishment was going through. Maybe there was something even worse than casket punishment. To erase such fears, we tried to concentrate even harder on our work. We kept working. As the metal sounds and the screams went on forever. So I can see why Takano is obsessed with torturing people. Alright. The only time we were allowed to exchange words with our roommates was right after turning off the lights to go to bed. Being located in the middle of the mountains, the orphanage was very quiet at night. After making sure the staff were far enough from our room, we could talk amongst ourselves. That was the only leisure time allowed to us, though it wasn't anything nice, like enjoying pleasant conversation. Why? Well, we mostly talked about others behind their backs. We spoke of things like that member of staff is only strict or unfair, or malicious towards this person, and so on, so on. We just repeated those topics forever until someone couldn't keep themselves awake anymore. We discussed how we'd get back at the staff, and we took revenge on all of them in our imagination. Some kids even started crying when talking about it, difficult as it was for us. Although the subjects we spoke of were negative, talking about them was the only way to vent our frustration, and even though we felt despair about tomorrow, we were able to fall asleep. But sometimes a different subject popped up. It was about Theory Gauka, House of Love and Mercy on the other side of the river. Over there, I hear they get not only nap time, but snack time too. Their president's a very nice person. The House of Love and Mercy was a privately run orphanage, like the one I was at, but it was a kind facility, unlike ours. It seemed like a fantasy land compared to our current environment. A few years before, when this place was worse, a few children tried to escape. Hard to believe, I know. There was a time when this orphanage was even worse to live at. Supposedly, 3 or 4 people tried to escape. I don't know the number, though. They headed to the House of Love and Mercy. Their escape was a success. Except for one unlucky child, they were able to get to the property of the House of Love and Mercy. I guess the staff couldn't follow them into the other orphanage's property. In other words, the other facility's property had to be out of their jurisdiction. The staff were frustrated that kids got away from them, and they dragged the one they caught back here. I'm sure they wanted to bring back the others who got away from them too. I'm certain the staff were determined not to let a single one escape. It was easy to see the determination and the obstinate way they locked the place up after that event. But they were never able to bring back the ones that got away. That's curious. Surely they'd be returned almost immediately. No matter how much the staff were mortified, they couldn't reclaim the children and punish them. In other words, if you could make it to the House of Love and Mercy, you could escape the evil clutches of this hell. On the other hand, the one they caught went through such misery afterwards, yet the exact details of how he was punished were never passed down. All that remained were ominous phrases left by those who knew him at the time. The drowned ducky, the mashed caterpillar, the splayed piggy. I can't even imagine what kind of punishments they were. The only thing I can say is those punishments were supposed to be far more harsh than casket punishment, which was the most cruel punishment I knew at the time. I can only imagine how horrible those punishments were from their ominous names. After that, the captured kid's wish came true, and he was able to leave the orphanage. Was he able to leave it safely, and enjoy his freedom while breathing in fresh air under the blue sky? Well, according to rumors, that's not what happened at all. While he was playing in the boiler room, he slipped and fell, injured his brain, and died. The children were instructed not to go into the boiler room after that incident. Everyone knew the boiler room was always locked. So everyone knew he was killed, and not just that. He was killed after being tortured. He was killed to teach the other children they would face hell on earth if they tried to escape, yet those who faced the risk and made it out obtained ordinary, average lives full of Love and Mercy's namesake, far better conditions than what we lived in here. Maybe the House of Love and Mercy was really heaven, maybe all the orphanages were the same, but compared to my orphanage, I bet anything else would have been better. Even if someone escaped successfully, the police would catch him, and he'd be sent back to the orphanage, which would be pretty much the same as being killed. However, if he could reach the House of Love and Mercy, they'd take him in. This seems like a far-fetched dream that's probably not true. They wouldn't send him back. By talking about escaping to the House of Love and Mercy, we were trying to forget the cruel reality around us. And then one day, the leader of our group, Eriko, said to us quietly, "Would you try to escape? If you had a chance to?" Who didn't want to escape from here? Yeah, fucking everyone does, right? The odds of success are questionable at best. It's a rather foolish question, but that wasn't what she meant. If there was a chance to escape, would you take that chance, knowing you had to go through if you got caught? That was what she meant. Not one of us could answer immediately. If the previous escape incident was a total success, we might have thought differently, but after that, the orphanage tightened up security to prevent runaways. All the doors and windows were locked, and it wouldn't be at all easy to get out. Even if another group escape was planned. Drink. Success rate would be very, very low. 3 escaped and 1 was caught before. Maybe 2 would be caught next time. Or maybe everyone would be. If I could, I'd want to escape. The house is so far away, the bridge is long too. We'll be caught before we get there. Besides, we can't even go outside. Everything's locked up. There were locks all over the orphanage. To escape, you'd need a key for both the inside and the outside. And after the lights were turned off, even each section of the hallway was individually locked. Damn, these guys are fucking paranoid. These guys are fucking paranoid. Holy shit. Each section of the hallway, each room, and the doors and windows are locked. That's a little bit suspicious, but alright. Make no mistake, this was a prison. And according to the rumors, orphanages receive government funding depending on the number of children they house, so if anyone escapes, they lose money. Also, if we're to expose the conditions at the orphanage, they'd end up being inspected, and things would get complicated for them. And that was why they were so intent on keeping us locked up. Sure, if there's a chance I'd want to escape, but realistically, there's no way we could. Every door is locked. Well, you know, then the hen house in the courtyard uses the same key as the door to the backstage. What? Really? Shh, shh. That seems dubious. Door lock keys are usually unique, unless you have a skeleton key. There are typically answer keys for most room doors and stuff like that. Like if you're like say managing an apartment complex, typically you do typically have a copy of all the keys individually, but you also have a master key that will open all the keys. So that will open all of the doors, so you can get in them. That is possibly what you saw being used. Let's see. Eriko Sheshta. Sometimes mass-produced locks take the same key. That is also true, and the older they are, the more likely that is to happen. Of course, most places use different types of locks, so this won't happen, but the staff at the orphanage, they may have overlooked it. So there were 2 locks that use the same key at the orphanage. I mean, theoretically, they could all use the same lock if they have a master key. So again, be very careful what you're believing in here. However, most of us never had a chance to even touch the keys. But there were a few exceptions. One of those was the hen house. Each room group took turns taking care of different chores. If your group was assigned to clean the hen house, you'd have to get the key to it from the teacher's office. You were supposed to return it immediately after you were done, but while taking care of the hen house, the key was in the children's hands. Well, the staff would occasionally come to check. They wouldn't keep an eye on us forever. Okay. I see the logic in your plan if you think that's true. If you think it's true that the backdoor key uses the same key as the hen house key, while someone's taking care of it, maybe you could take them to go on a bathroom run. They could claim to go to the bathroom and try the backdoor key to verify this. You were thinking about using the key, are you? Let's not. It's too dangerous. They did test it, right? They would test it, surely. Of course, it's dangerous. There's only one. So it's different if we're in a group. Wait, why? You know why only one kid was caught last time? They were desperate. And so to escape as a group, they did something to increase the chance of success. That was why only one of them was caught. What did they do? They scattered as they ran. They dashed in different directions. They waited until the day when there were only a few people working the orphanage and ran this way and that. And so, although it all depended on luck, it would increase the chance of success for sure. On your own, you'd probably have no hope, but if the staff chased after other people, your own chance of escaping successfully would increase. In other words, Eriko is inviting us to escape with her. The more children joined, the more each of our chances would increase. But among us, there were children who tattled to the staff for their own benefit. She had to be very careful who she talked to. Eriko must have trusted us a lot. Eriko, me, Tomomi, and Kikuko. Don't even try it. No, don't do it. 4 children. Do any of you have to stay here? Want to stay here a day longer? 3 of us shook our heads, but at the same time we couldn't agree to escape with her either. Of course you don't want to stay here, even an hour longer. Even if we did the same thing as we did yesterday, we might get yelled at tomorrow. I can't stand it anymore. I can't stand living in fear of what to do and what not to do, so I won't be yelled at. We all feel the same way. We could endure strict rules, but it was almost impossible to endure vague ones. It wasn't too much of a stretch to say the rules depended on the mood of the staff. This is okay, that isn't okay. Such borderline rules changed daily, and if we were to say anything about that, we'd be treated horribly for it. Escape, even if I have to do it alone. Like I said, the more people that join, the better our chance. Think about it. If they find out about this henhouse key trick, they're sure to change the lock on the back door. In other words, we only have one chance. So even if you regret not joining in later, it'll be too late. But, oh, I'm scared. I'm scared too. If we get caught, we'll be killed. Tomomi and Kikuko weren't the only ones who felt afraid. The fear was perfectly understandable, because all of a sudden the fear of punishment that would follow had become very realistic. I'm sure Eriko felt the same way too, but her courage was suppressing her fear, and because of that, she shared her idea with us. Do you plan to stay here forever? No way. I know you're scared, but this is the only chance we have. You have to be brave just this once. What about you, Miyuko? Do you want to go with me? Unlike Tomomi and Kikuko, I wasn't trembling that much. Of course, I was scared in my own way, but compared to the other two, I must have appeared rather calm. Can we really escape? Of course, Eriko couldn't guarantee our success, but I had to ask anyway. There is no guarantee, but if you join me, I'll have a better chance of escaping than trying to run on my own. Of course, the same goes for you as well. Riko gave a calculated reason, but I'm sure she wanted a friend to agree with her. I mean, she's just looking for help. That was probably more important to her than increasing her chances to escape. Tomomi, Kikuko, if you're too scared, I won't force you. Miyoko and I will escape ourselves too, isn't it? Riko rushed the two to make up their minds. She's applying pressure to make them make a hasty decision. Bit of a risky thing to do, unless you're actually under a time crunch. Very risky, right? You should probably give them a night to sleep it over or something like that. It almost looked cold, but it was her way of mustering their courage. Putting them under the gun and trying to make them make a hasty decision in her favor, that's not exactly amazing. It was because it was very possible, regardless of the outcome of her escape attempt, as our roommates, those two would be held responsible. It's not like we'll do it tomorrow. Our turn to take care of the hen house is in a week. We'll wait for the perfect time to do it, and if we don't feel it's safe, we'll wait until next turn. They got a week. Okay, they got time. They got time to plan. We'll be careful. Rotation of the staff and timing were important, but we also each had to know the way to the House of Love and Mercy. We were planning to split up, so we had to know the area. I made up my mind. Okay, I'm coming with you. We'll let the timer escapes carefully, okay? Of course, we'll be killed if we get caught. I don't want to die. I'll come too. Me too, me too. Momi and Kikuko agreed, so we all decided to escape as a group. We waited for the perfect opportunity. We waited for the day where only a few staff members were at the orphanage. And we decided to let God take care of the rest. It's open! Maybe it was the way I did it. Eriko tried to open the lock several times without success, but I got it open on the first attempt. The back door opened slowly, and we felt a cool breeze. This wasn't the world of freedom just yet. In fact, it was the opposite. If the staff found out we were here, we'd be in big trouble. It was a huge world of danger. And they've never seen outside past this door, so we're in trouble. Unless we went through that dangerous world, we wouldn't be able to go any further. Okay, let's go. I think Eriko wanted to say that. We were planning to leave with that as our cue, but what we heard instead wasn't Eriko's voice. What are you kids doing there? We started running. It was raining. We got soaked immediately and our clothes stuck to our skin. Well, that would normally be uncomfortable. We couldn't even stop to think about that. Okay, good. Rain. It'll make it harder to see you. Harder to run away, of course. Harder to see where you're going. But it'll be hard to track you if you can escape line of sight or hide away from them. We could only keep running in the rain. We were dashing on gravel, but it felt more like trudging through a muddy rice field. My feet kept sinking and I couldn't pull them up. I was frustrated because no matter how fast I tried to run, I wasn't gaining speed. I felt a sense of urgency. I heard someone yelling escape behind me and all I could do was run like crazy. Everyone, in different directions, come on, scatter! With Rika's cue, we went different ways, hoping they wouldn't be coming after us. Would we be able to reunite safely at the House of Love and Mercy? All four of us were there together. Maybe someone would be missing? No, maybe everyone else would make it? And I'd be the one who gets caught. My thoughts were interrupted by the voice of a staff member coming from behind me. Hold it! Wait, hold it right there! The staff members should have numbered fewer than us. So if I was lucky, they wouldn't be coming after me. Praying the voices I heard in the distance weren't after me, I looked back for a moment. If I had time to turn around, why didn't I take another step forward? Why didn't I try to escape further? As I turned around, I felt a huge hand cover my face. Its pinky finger slipped into my open mouth. Bite it off. The hand grabbing my face shoved me into the muddy gravel. Of course, I didn't stay quiet. I fought back, and then I saw his face. It was the scariest face I'd ever seen, and I realized it immediately. He only wanted to capture me alive to use me as an example. And considering what would happen to me afterwards, killing me here on the spot wouldn't pose a problem, would it? Well, he looked at me with unworldly hate, ready to end my life here and now. His pinky finger ended up touching my tongue. The indescribably nasty taste sent an icky feeling through my whole body. Bite his finger off? That's it. This is what my murder tastes like. He's gonna shove that finger down my windpipe and suffocate me. And so in order to live, I fought back in the only way I could. Bite, 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 bite. There we go! Something warm filled my mouth. It felt like swallowing blood after a nosebleed. I spit it from my mouth and ran without turning around, leaving behind the staff member, clutching his pinky finger. I don't like Takano, but good job. That's exactly what you want to do. I'll kill you! I heard his roars echoing behind me. It wasn't a man that was after me. It was a beast. He had no interest in capturing me. His only goal was to see me dead. My shoes had slipped off. They weren't sneakers, so they came off easily while I was running like mad. So she's wearing, like, flip-flops? Sandals, perhaps? My bare feet struck the gravel over and over. It was painful, but I didn't care, because if I stopped, I knew it would happen to me. Well, she escaped. Tree branches cut my face, and barbed wires scratched my thighs. They had barbed wire lining the outside of this property? Okay. My feet and toes were bloody from running on gravel. The blood from the staff member's pinky finger dripped from my mouth, staining my chin and chest. I was running for my life with scratches and cuts all over my body. If I were to get caught, I'd be killed. If my pursuer had any sense, I'd be killed after being tortured. But if he didn't, well, I'd be killed on the spot. I don't really want to be killed. I don't want to be killed. My lungs were about to explode. My mind was blank from fear and lack of oxygen. I was about to lose consciousness. I might have given in if I didn't hear the voice of the staff member coming after me. My knees were shaking. My legs wouldn't move properly. I felt like I was going to fall like a puppet with its strings cut. But I couldn't fall. I couldn't fall just yet. It was too late. My face hit the gravel. I felt the awful sensation of falling, and immediately after the roar of the beast coming from behind me. My finger! My finger! Screaming, wakes up. I must have hit my thigh against the steering wheel when I jumped. I can feel the throbbing pain. Delayed slightly. I'm sweating all over. I wiped the sweat on my forehead and put my hand on my chest. Only then realizing how fast my heart was beating. Looks like it was just a dream for Takano. I rubbed my thigh. I rubbed it in a straight line. That's not where I hit the steering wheel. But I feel like this is where it hurts. I can't see a scary beast in the moonlit car. I have my shoes on. I'm not covered in blood. My toes are fine too. Someone knocked on the window, startling me. Major, it's time. Thank you. I wanted to take a nap, so I told them to wake me in an hour. Maybe an hour was too long. Too long a nap actually makes you tired. Yeah, an hour's a pretty long time for a nap. I put my seat back up and got out of the car. The cool breeze feels good on my skin. Also, I have no clue why the fuck this military organization let her take a nap while on duty. What job can you actually work where you can straight up just take a nap instead of working? The fuck job are you working, buddy? I only see the moon. There's nothing else to see on this mountain trail. My car and command vehicle disguised as a trailer are parked on the side of the street. I can still feel the bad taste in my mouth. I spat it out on the side of the street, but even that couldn't get rid of it. The taste of blood, saliva, and rain. Sweat from my forehead and raindrops got into my mouth, but I couldn't swallow, so I ended up drooling. The sensation around my lips brought back memories, and I tried to wipe my mouth. Maybe I'm nervous, that's why I had such a bad dream. I think there's a coffee machine in the command vehicle. An unpleasant cup of coffee will wake me up. So? Anything happened yet? No, not yet. We've got Gifu's scheduled check-in. Everything's okay over there. I see. Could someone make me a cup of coffee? Sure. Cream and sugar? Just cream, please. No, sugar too. I still have a bad taste in my mouth. The feeling of biting and crushing his little finger and his filthy blood filling my mouth. I'm sure a sweeter cup of coffee will wash down that bad taste and wake me from this nightmare completely. Well, at least she bit off his finger. Not like it's gonna kill him, but maybe if we're lucky, he's permanently missing a digit. That's what we're hoping for, right? Assuming that was an accurate memory and not just a random nightmare. That was a grim start to chapter 1. All right. I guess we are following Takano around to get an explanation of things from her perspective. I mean, it is... Well, this might be a cheating, but the icon in Steam is, of course, Takano's face. Strangely enough, I guess we're not getting any more Hanyu, because we're getting all Takano's perspective? Bit weird. Bit of a weird choice to introduce a character who does nothing for an entire arc and then go up to someone else, but okay. I kind of thought she'd be more relevant. I kind of thought Hanyu'd be more relevant, but we're getting the Takano story. Banquet to back end, over. One more speaker, and then the toast starts. Are you ready? This is back end. We're ready. We can't hear anything from inside, so give us a cue when the speech is wrapping up. Listen up. 10 bottles of beer per table. Make sure to deliver them to your area smoothly. Young hotel workers dressed smartly in bow ties pulled bottle after bottle out of the beer cases preparing for the toast. They waited for their cue to serve the drinks while listening through the intercom. At a normal party, they could put bottles of beer on the table ahead of time, but if there was a lecture before the party, they couldn't. Guests don't mind sushi going dry due to a long speech, but they don't like seeing their tables wet with condensation from the bottles of beer. More than anything, they certainly don't want to drink warm beer. That's why beer has to be served right before a toast. However, there's always a speech before a toast, and usually a long one. Especially at a big party like this, there's lots of guests to give speeches. It's extremely difficult to know when to serve. For that reason, the bottles end up sitting outside by the banquet room, and people end up drinking warm beer anyway. There were several dozen banquet tables with white tablecloths in them in the banquet room. Okay. Approximately 8 people sitting at each table. There were at least a few hundred people in the room. The room was filled with excitement. There were many plates with many different kinds of food on each table. Okay, so who's having a banquet? A sushi platter, a sashimi platter, a fruit platter. Along the wall, there were cooks ready to serve fresh sashimi. All the guests appeared to be well-mannered gentlemen. They were clearly notable people in various different fields. The huge, beautiful chandelier above them clearly indicated this hotel held a status good enough for these famous people. An elderly gentleman was giving a lengthy speech on the stage before making a toast. Usually people don't like such long speeches, especially if it's before a toast. But the guests occasionally shouted, yes, yes, and it gave him loud applause, filling the room with their fervor. Well, maybe fervor is a pleasant way to put it. It was probably more accurate to say their excitement was bizarre. Which country would actually teach people not to show respect towards their own flag? There are no others. Happening only in Japan. This man is not aware of the country America. As I'm pretty sure flag policy is violated in basically every single way by just about every excited American. As a friendly reminder, you're not supposed to be ever making clothing out of the American flag. Nobody treats the flag properly in America. And probably the easiest way to treat the flag properly is just to not own a copy of one. Right, that's right. It's forcing people to respect their national flag and anthem and obstruction of their freedom? That's a foolish idea. Listen, love for one's national flag and anthem come naturally to all. Debatable. Debatable. To know ourselves, to know our culture, and understand our history and our country ourselves itself, those are the things that make you realize that you're a Japanese citizen, that make you understand the part you play as a citizen of this country. This guy is big into nationalism. And the feeling you get from that is the love towards your own country. However, those anti-Japan teachers are proclaiming it's militaristic brainwashing. Those stupid claims are wrong. Repeat that. Forcing people to respect their flag and anthem is an obstruction of their freedom? Yes, being required to respect the flag and anthem are a restriction on freedoms by definition. Whether or not they're wrong is a different story. And whether or not loving the flag itself and the anthem come naturally to people is up for debate. And a fairly tribalistic notion rather than an intelligent one. Okay. You haven't intellectually made a decision that you should. You've made an arbitrary statement that it comes naturally without defending that. So, populist speaker as well? Alright. Knowing your culture and your history and your country itself make you realize you're a Japanese citizen and encourage you to play the part of your country, giving you the feeling of love towards your own country. I feel like if you knew your own history, you'd probably be less excited about it and more interested to make it a better history. And I'm going to apply that to literally every country on the planet. I don't think there's a single country that you can look at the entirety of their history and be like, wow, this place could have been better. Like, well, this place had some nice ideas here, there's some nice ideas here, and some really bad ideas here. But, okay. Reading your history will inherently make you love your country. That is probably a false statement. What are those people doing anyway? They're teaching our children to hate being Japanese. They're brainwashing them with this self-destructive education. They're teaching our children Japan should be ashamed of itself, and they should be ashamed of being Japanese. Well, local history says that's probably true. Recent history says that's probably true for a little bit. Forget about who you are and deny your country. That's not what they're teaching, but okay. These innocent children listen and believe such nonsense. Of course they do. They go to school to learn things, right? I mean, they go to school because they're obligated to. If their teachers teach them that, of course the children believe it. Can you believe such corruption exists? We gotta do something about this country's education now, no matter what it takes. The sound of applause filled the banquet room. All the gentlemen agreed and expressed they felt the same way by cheering him on. After that, a gentleman wearing a cloth sash approached the stage. The hall welcomed him onto the stage with another round of thunderous applause. A rousing theme for a popular drama series played as he took the stage, but it was entirely unnecessary before the overwhelming applause. The man's sash carried his name written in large letters along with the name of the prefecture he was running for office in. Let me introduce you to a patriot. X-Kun. Triple X-Kun. Quadruple X-Kun. Right. This man has served the former governor as his right-hand man, as director of the office of the governor for many years, supporting the prefecture's government for a long time. Since the previous governor decided to retire, he was appointed as the next governor. Unfortunately, we have those anti-Japan teachers in our prefecture. While they proclaimed freedom of education and freedom of thought, they're shamelessly forcing an anti-Japan doctrine down on our children. They don't teach real history, they teach our children everything was Japan's fault. I mean, sort of. It's like, most of your invasions are probably your fault, actually. And you know what's kind of funny about this one? Most, like, of all the countries, I feel like Japan has the least claim to other territories. Like Japan literally had an isolationist policy for literal centuries, where they just sat on their islands and didn't interact with anybody. So when you invade other people, you can't be like, it's pretty hard to be like, it's that other country's fault. You're like, did they invade you first? No? What the fuck are you talking about then? Like, you don't have a land claim, you know, like Europe's a really messy region. lots of boundary conflicts throughout history, empires rising and falling, half of Europe being conquered by, France, and half of Europe being conquered by the Romans and by the Germans. Like, it's all over the place. All the time. Boundaries shifting every which way. Japan's been Japanese for so long. I don't even know how you get that opinion, right? It's like, okay, Japan is Japan, and China is China because you guys have been like, that's not fucking Japan for 5 centuries. Like, what are you talking about? It's like, so is your invasion your fault? Yep. You invading other countries your fault? Probably. Like, they weren't invading you, and you were clearly not making a claim on them earlier. It's mostly your fault. They don't even mention the true purpose of the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, or all those who fought to save Asian people from Western control. Yeah, okay, go with that. Go with that. This is the nice way of saying we wanted an empire and to rule people. It wasn't quite the co-prosperity sphere that they labeled it as. That's like the Patriot Act. Not exactly an act anyone who's actually patriotic would vote on. China always being China. Well, to be more specific, China always being China. I should be more specific. It is more like China distinctly not being Japanese for the past several hundred years, and all of the Japanese peoples mostly agreeing that China isn't theirs because they spent 5 centuries in isolation. They're like, it's not our problem. We don't own this. We don't have a claim to it. We just fuck off and do our own thing. It's off. We don't want you in our country. If they're gonna do that, they have a really hard time arguing that they should have a chunk of China, right? Like, pretty hard to argue that when you've like objectively denied that for a long time. So if you get bonked for being like super aggressive for no reason, it's kind of your fault. After all, one of the main reasons I thought they were aggressively expanding and rapidly militarizing was because they were trying to catch up to the Western powers. You know, they realized how far behind they were technologically. That's why they had like the conflict with Russia. The conflict with Russia before the First World War? I think the First World War. Maybe before the second one, I don't remember. Like, before, that's why they had like the Sino-Russia wars, or not the fucking Japanese, Sino's Chinese, I'm an idiot, so, that's why they had the Japan-Russia wars several times. Because they're like aggressively expanding to play catch up on the West's technology, military tactics, etc. Creating conflicts everywhere, which is mostly their fault because, if they hadn't been hiding in a corner of the world telling people to fuck off, they'd probably be a little bit further ahead. Or at least be aware of where their state was and could actively, like, progress themselves with access to more information, but anyway. Kind of like you fell behind where you were hiding in the corner and then you complain about it, it's mostly your fault. Alright, they don't even talk about how many Asian countries are actually Western colonies. Before Japan stood up for our freedom during the war. Our country recovered amazingly since then, yet our children don't know any of that. Okay, let's read, because the teachers don't teach them. They don't talk about how Asian countries were actually Western colonies before Japan stood up for our freedom during the war. Our country recovered amazingly since then, yet our children don't know that. Our country... I mean, I feel like people can recognize a lot of economic growth, or lots of opportunities. You just don't teach them. How truly sad. I can't stand the fact those anti-Japan teachers are actually teaching our children. Alongside the teachers who take teaching seriously, they're insulting our educational institutions. I'm gonna say that they probably didn't emphasize how the end of World War II resulted in a lot of European empires relinquishing their states. Probably because they're trying to push the exact opposite message, and recent history is very hard to take neutrally. That's probably what it is. The closer related you are to like the history, the harder it is to have an impartial viewpoint. So, while you can have an impartial viewpoint on recent history, and it's easier to have like an impartial viewpoint on something that literally doesn't affect you. So like say, You know, I can read a book on anything I want to about stuff that happened 500 years ago, and I don't give a flying fuck what the result is, right? I'm just like reading it, and then I make my own judgment because based on like what I know of the situation. Whereas, you know, if you're directly involved, you probably have like a personal stake in something, and it's a lot harder to teach something impartially rather than just delivering the most appropriate message. They're insulting our educational institutions. You'll become a governor and get rid of those teachers. I'll straighten out our education system and make sure our children grow to be decent young people who can carry on Japan's future. Hey, X-Kun, quadruple X-Kun, announces his candidacy for the next year's prefectural governorship. We appreciate your support, bro. I promise I'll straighten out Japan's education system. Thank you for your support. Again, the banquet room filled with applause. The man was receiving a standing ovation. I need to explain a bit about this banquet before you misunderstand. It wasn't the conference of a political association or a lecture by a political candidate. It was hard to believe, but this is nothing more than a meeting of a college's alumni association. Everyone should be familiar with what those are. I mean, I have an idea. Whether it's elementary school, junior high, high school, or college, once you graduate from one of these, you normally belong to an association of alumni. I think I technically do, but fucked if I pay attention. You receive invitations for reunions where you enjoy talking about the good old days. However, there's many different types of such organizations. Some are simple, some are united with tighter bonds, and once an organization becomes united with those tight bonds, it's no longer a simple organization of alumni. Rather, it becomes a significant faction known as an alma mater clique. Or clique, sorry. In Japanese society, it's traditional for graduates to form tighter bonds that go beyond the level of an organization. Really? Also, the more superior the alma mater, the stronger the tendency holds true. The Imperial University, one of the best universities in the country, is famous for the deep bonds its graduates form. Why do superior people like to bond? Well, it may be because they take pride in being superior. Okay. More than that, maintaining connections is the most significant reason. All Imperial University graduates are elites in their respective fields. They are likely to succeed and become important people. I see. When they do, the unity of their alumni association grants immeasurable meaning. In fact, even today, the Imperial University graduates maintain their tight academic clique. And they hold a great influence throughout many different fields. They interact with other universities as well, so the graduates' bonds are extremely tight, even today. Additionally, while Imperial University usually refers to the University of Tokyo, sometimes it's used to mean all 7 major universities in Japan. They're located in Tokyo, Kyoto, Tohoku, Kyushu, Hokkaido, Osaka, and Nagoya. These are all great schools. There happens to be an organization of alumni that includes all of those 7 universities. The elderly gentlemen in this banquet room were each from one of those organizations. However, not every graduate gets an invitation here automatically. It's a society of select gentlemen, and in order to become a member, one must first fulfill several conditions, such as the recommendation from an existing member, contribution to the society, possession of status, and so forth. Therefore, all members are important people from different fields, and obviously the power of this organization is of a political nature. But there's one more very important criterion one has to meet to join. Strong patriotism, a heart that longs to contribute to Japan and its rebirth, and as a result, this organization has become extremely nationalistic. Up on the stage, the candidate for the governorship was talking passionately still, and amongst those elderly gentlemen in the crowd, Takano can be found. She seemed used to this kind of conference and seemed unsurprised at anything that was said, but at the same time, she looked rather fed up with it. As she was in attendance, she must have been one of the members, which meant she possessed not only an extremely excellent academic background, that the older gentleman here acknowledged her equivalent contributions to society, and that she possessed strong patriotism. However, her background was the only qualification she had met to join. She was only able to join as a special case due to her connections. She didn't even hold prejudiced ideas like the other members did, so why was she here? Well, probably the same reason as the man giving a speech up on stage. The man on stage didn't actually have prejudiced ideas, much like Takano. He only prepared a speech he knew the guests would like. Politicians only want votes. Each and every person has a vote, but appealing to each of them takes too long, so the most efficient way is to appeal to organizations with a unified idea and a unified will. In other words, this man gives his speech so he can garner support from these powerful people. The gentlemen in the banquet room then do their best to support him since he appears to share their ideals. They offer many different kinds of expediency, support, assistance, to an outrageous degree, I might add. If the day's event continued in the same way, the organization would likely decide to officially support him. They'll probably give him a lot of financial aid. They'll assist in different ways as well. Of course, the man on stage won't be the only one gaining something. When he wins the election and becomes governor, the organization will welcome the governor as a new member and gain even more influence. And eventually, the organization will become so powerful, nobody can ignore it. Those of you reading this get the sense now that they're probably no mere alumni association. You'd be right. After reaching this level, they're a fine syndicate. Well, they would be a secret society if the group wasn't so open about its activities. Now, I'm sure some of your readers are brushing this off, thinking there's no way a suspicious organization could exist in Japan. Yeah, that's right. There are no suspicious organizations in Japan. It is a perfect country. Literally nothing ever goes wrong on it. The crime rate is 0. And everyone is a perfect human being. Right. Of course. Everything I've explained is entirely true. There are several such influential groups and organizations within our society, and you need to understand that they hold powerful political clout and influence our national policies. True. Some are alma mater cliques, like the one I've described above. Others are scientific societies serving different parties, industrial groups, advisory committees, religious organizations, community service groups, large companies, and so forth. There are also right wings and left wings, the hawk and the dove. I won't list their specific names here. Yet you've probably read them every now and then in your average newspaper. In Japan, the terms for such forces aren't very common. Most of your readers probably think of a suspicious organization wearing white hoods when you hear the phrase secret society and laugh it off. Unfortunately, that's a huge mistake. In America, where there's more territory and citizens, there's way more groups like that. And they possess such vast influence that ignoring them is impossible, so the terms they use for such forces don't apply to those on the scale of this syndicate. Sometimes, people say that such groups have more power than the White House, and they're referred to as the shadow government. Even here in Japan, we had a shadow government before the war, our Zaibatsu. After we lost the war, GHQ dismantled those blocks, but 40 years have passed since then. Zaibatsu was like the three largest companies in Japan, right? If I recall correctly. That was like the was it like it was like the biggest companies? I'm trying to remember. I know Mitsubishi was one of them, right? Mitsubishi is one of the Zaibatsu. I don't remember the rest of them. I don't fucking remember them. I could probably look it up. I forget how they split them, but I know Mitsubishi was one of the Zaibatsu at one point. And nowadays, they basically only make cars. They started showing Silhouette's costumes. Ooh. We're getting closer. There's no guarantee our country hasn't given birth to another shadow government, given how good we are at collusion, groundwork, and backroom deals. Miyo Takano was, in fact, attending a conference of such a shadow government. She's gotten quite a lot of influence in the past, how many ever years she's been living. That was fast. It might appear to be a guest house at a huge golf course. There were no golfers in sight, but by appearances, that must be it. But appearances can be deceiving. This wasn't a golf course, but a huge backyard. The guest house was in fact a very stylish mansion. Normal people would be surprised to learn this was a private residence. The interior of the building was as lavish as the exterior. I don't want to be super rude to this guy, but considering the attitudes of the people living here, you would have expected they'd have some very traditional flooring. And like traditional Japanese rooms, or literally anything that was traditionally Japanese in this picture. I don't see anything that looks Japanese here. Expensive looking decorations on the wall, expensive looking bottles of alcohol on the shelves. That's the kind of room Takano was in. I only see books here, actually. There was a knock at the door, and an old man in a wheelchair and a young woman pushing it entered. As Takano stood up to bow, the old man stopped her, raising his right hand. Oh no need to stand up. Long time no see. I've been telling you to come see me any time, but you never do. It's great to see you, Koizumi-sensei. The old man sat down on the sofa with assistance from the woman. He was very old, his face covered in wrinkles, and he could hardly do anything on his own. Even so, he still held a great deal of power and influence. Oh my, you haven't changed a bit, have you? I can see the lipstick on your neck. Oh. Is that right? Good grief, how embarrassing. There was no lipstick on his neck. The woman who was helping him with his wheelchair was too beautiful to be a mere helper, though Takano had suspected something. As it turned out, her guess was correct. Although he was so old he could die the next day, he wanted to stay sexually active until the very end. Even the Grim Reaper would think that's just absurd. You've become quite beautiful yourself. You're not a little girl anymore. Oh, stop. If you really think that way, why did you try to touch my bottom? Oh, what have you got to lose for having an old guy like me touch your butt? Well, I'm sure you have plenty of chance to touch a softer butt, don't you? Some casual sexual harassment. Good times, good times. Takano and the old man enjoyed a tasteless conversation. They'd clearly known each other a long time and were very close. The young woman came back in to serve tea. After she left, the old man started speaking. Anyway, I'm proud of you, Miyo-chan. I'm sure your grandfather in heaven is proud of you too. Oh, I hope so. But I'm not even close to approaching the level of my grandfather's great work. Takano was unlucky in many different ways. The era he lived in. If he lived in a different era, I'm sure he would have finished his research. But he lived in that era, and ironically, that was why he noticed the existence of the syndrome. The world today is in the nuclear era. With America and the Soviet Union glaring at each other over mounds of nuclear stockpiles, it takes nukes to have authority as a major power. Sup, dude? Proto-Merlin's hella spicy. Summer Proto-Merlin. It ain't just regular Proto-Merlin, my dude. That's the summer event servant reveal. Exciting as that is. We haven't yet seen the anniversary servant. Those are usually extra spicy. We've forever abandoned our nukes thanks to these 3 anti-nuclear principles. In this age, we're now a nation without nukes. How deplorable. In the middle of the 20th century, despite rising tensions between the East and West, there was a temporary peace known as the Cold War, brought by a balance of nuclear weapons pointed at one another. Permanent membership in the UN were monopolized by nations with nuclear arms, and still are today. They secured their predominance with nuclear weapons, bound the world with nuclear non-proliferation treaties, and eternally banned non-nuclear nations from the world stage. That's not an inaccurate assumption. That's not inaccurate and even holds somewhat true today, I'd say, since all of the permanent members of the Security Council and whatnot haven't changed because they're permanent. So if you're not a permanent member, you will never have that omnipotent veto power to say, fuck you, I do it what I want, and the UN can't interrupt me. For Japan to become a nation that can compete with the world, it must develop nuclear arms or something as powerful. I mean, you have to reform the UN, because it's not possible to get that on that, but anyway. If that's what you're looking for, or just trying to get power, I guess you could accumulate that. It's doable. It's not like you need the kind of soft power you could get from negotiations. You could maybe work with some... You could maybe just sit on a threat. That would work. That's the North Korean strat, right? Get nukes, be threatening. Honestly, I'd say you probably need them for defense, but theoretically Japan's being protected by America, so they don't really need to actually have their own nukes. Assuming the Orange Man is not doing anything crazy in office. Realistically, Japan will never arm itself with nuclear weapons. Oh, I know. The citizens won't accept it. Even if the government ignores their opinions and armed itself, it wouldn't work. By abandoning nuclear weaponry, Japan gained the deterrent power of the United States. Though some people thought the only way for Japan to become equal to the United States would be to get nuclear weapons of their own. Realistically, that was impossible. Even if Japan armed itself with them, it wouldn't let Japan join the great powers. Takano and the old man discussed the balance of nuclear power in the world, and eventually the sound of the cuckoo clock reminded them to return to the main subject at hand. The old man pointed to the attaché case that had been sitting next to Takano. She nodded once, opened it, and removed the contents. There were brand new bills packed in it. How much was actually in there? A bundle of brand new million-yen bills is 1 centimeter. They must have been at least enough to make up 8 digits. There were also 2 more attaché cases by her side. However, neither Takano nor the old man were surprised at all. He closed the attaché case and bowed. Thank you very much, Koizumi-sensei. I'll never forget it. Money should be handled by the young people. I can't take it to heaven with me. I just hope this will be of assistance to you. Use it wisely. Of course I will. I use the money only to make my grandfather's dream come true. I envy Takano-kun. What a wonderful grandchild he has. I'm sure he's bragging about you up there. I haven't done anything yet. I'll have earned this praise when I complete my grandfather's work. Jealous. My boys are no good. They're only interested in making money. What really matters is how the money is spent. How you contribute to the country is what's most important. That's how you repay your debt to it, you know? Oh. So you are saying treating all those little lovers so lavishly is a way of repaying your country? Why, of course. When they shop, the country makes money. Money goes around, you see? However, those lovers would probably end up buying some foreign goods. Things probably don't work out quite the way this man thinks they do. Takano chuckled to himself. But the money I give to those women and the money I give you are completely different. I know that well. You've worked hard. You've retained trust and support from so many people. This is the first time I've mentioned it, but Haruyama-kun and Mochizuki-kun both weren't sure about you because of your age. At first, at least. That's why I'm acknowledging your efforts and I'm giving you this money. I understand. Also, for me to give you this money means I recognize you as the official successor of Takano-kun's research. Thank you very much. Thank you for believing in me. I truly appreciate it. Don't mention it. The research is Takano's and yours too. He wouldn't want anyone else to take over. So thanks to all your efforts, I didn't have to spend too much time convincing those other folk. Completing my grandfather's research is the least I can do for him. I won't begrudge any effort towards that aim. Takano smiled as she remembered everything she had to go through to get to this point. It went without saying, but the old men around Takano saw her as someone from their grandchildren's generation, or maybe even younger. Just how much trouble did she have to go to in order to gain the trust of those with such a large generation gap? It was hard to describe to those who couldn't even imagine her trouble. But Takano earned it. She gathered allies, she drove away enemies, she garnered support and forced them to recognize her. She spent a long time establishing trust and rising to a status that the old men would welcome. Which is all the more reason this meeting was a reward for her many days of hardship. No PNG's fighting. Oh, we were playing some Grand Order earlier. Gotta do a few of the advanced quests after them. In fact, I hear there's new ones coming out today too. So I'll probably have to check them out tomorrow. Now that she officially had a powerful influence backing her, she could spread her wings and see the completion of her grandfather's unfinished research. Well, now that you're officially continuing his research, there's something I need to tell you, Miyo. Oh? I'm listening. The old man paused and pulled an expensive cigarette from the cigarette holder on the table. Takano lit it up for him. She didn't smoke herself, but knowing the old man did, she kept a lighter in her pocket. The constant build-up of the little gestures like that were how she gained the trust she held today. Takano noticed the Hinamizawa syndrome in Manchuria, not Japan. Yes. According to my grandfather's journal, around 1940 he learned many soldiers sent from Hinamizawa to the Kwantung army expressed terminal symptoms which led him to surmise an unknown infectious parasite dwelled in the region. Under the harsh conditions of the war, people sometimes lost their mind, but in those conditions, those who were sent to far battlefields from Hinamizawa spent their days under duress, and occasionally they exhibited terminal symptoms, hallucinated, and caused twisted incidents. Yet all that occurred in the extensive chaos of the battlefield. Every incident was handled separately, and no one suspected an underlying cause. At the time, Takano was working as a military physician. And in the Kwantung army, he was researching the prevention of different infectious diseases. One day he noticed several incidents of deranged behavior were occurring among soldiers from the same hometown. He hypothesized these symptoms were unique to those from Hinamizawa, and began his own personal research. He hired soldiers from Hinamizawa as workers in his research center and studied them there. Then he learned of the unique Hinamizawa faith in Oyashiro-sama, and he was convinced he found an infectious parasite with unique properties. Some may wonder how he could be so certain the symptoms were caused by parasites. At the beginning of the 20th century, German doctors proved some unknown diseases were caused by bacteria and parasites. At the time, it wasn't too far of a jump to assume that unknown pathogens could be behind unknown diseases. That's fair. That's a fair assessment. For instance, in modern times, it's been revealed that beriberi is caused by vitamin B1 deficiency, but at the start of the 20th century, I don't even know what beriberi is. Hold up, what is beriberi? it's a disease, but what are the symptoms? It damages nerves, leads to decreased muscle strength, and eventually muscle paralysis. Interesting. Typically caused by a deficiency of vitamin B1. Yeah, okay. What are symptoms? Waking up short of breath, swollen lower legs, rapid heart rate, shortness of breath during physical activity. Huh, okay. It often occurs in developing countries among people with a diet that consists mostly of white rice or highly refined carbs. Interesting. Well, now I have another thing to be scared of: eating too many carbs. Damn. As its symptoms are pretty vague. I hate when you look up a disease and its symptoms are so freaking vague. You're like, I have a third of these. What the fuck am I supposed to do? Do I have this disease? Because whenever you read about a disease, you don't actually have to have all the symptoms. You only need to have like one or two of them can be enough to diagnose you with them. It's fucking annoying. Hate reading medical stuff. It's always awful. That's why you never look up like cancer or something. Like you never look up any deadly disease. If you look it up, you'll always have it based on list of symptoms. Just like COVID. Wow, being tired's a symptom. Wow, what a fucking great symptom. I'm tired all the time. Have I had COVID for the last fucking 20 years? Nope. Oh, I guess not. So, an unknown pathogen. My grandfather predicted his research would be valuable to the army, so he asked for a budget but they just left it. As a researcher, her grandfather was talented and passionate, but when it came to gaining the aid of political powers, he simply struck out, well, not everyone can market themselves exceedingly well. Inamizawa syndrome, the possible existence of a parasite that infected the human brain and controlled emotions. Even though he made the remarkable achievement of discovering a mystery no one explained before him, he was unable to convince others of the achievement and spent his life alone, unable to garner support, and unable to achieve recognition for his achievement. Independent research has its limits. I mean, there's lots of things that occur based on your diet. A deficiency of B1 resulting from an excess of carbs is unfortunate, but I mean, it's perfectly reasonable as you need a somewhat balanced diet. You'll probably be okay as long as you don't eat literally nothing but white rice for weeks on end. As it specified developing countries, not developed countries, so I assume this is like a disease you might get if you're living in China or Japan 100 years ago, and your diet is literally rice every single day, 3 meals a day, plain white rice or whatever wild rice you're eating. That would probably be the cause of something like that, rather than like, wow, I had rice too often. I had rice 2 times this week. I had rice 2 times this week. I'm gonna get like very, very like what kind of fun. Yeah, talented people, funding, and backup. Independent research has its limits. A research project can be successful only if all those things are present. We need talent, we need backup, and we need funding. All right. Takano noticed her grandfather's mistakes, and that was why she did everything she could to obtain it. All of that. Yep, you need some fucking funding, man. The military was at the time hoping for a low-cost, immediate acting weapon. While Takano's research was extremely intriguing, it didn't meet the military's expectations. I heard you're the only one who understood my grandfather's research, weren't you? In his journal, he calls you his best friend. We came from the same hometown. It was a miracle to run into someone from the same town on such a distant battlefield. Although we weren't close in age, we became very good friends. We talked a lot. Many times he told me his research would be revolutionary and asked me to lay the groundwork to secure funding for full-scale research. I read in his journal you talked to many different people about this. Unfortunately, its value wasn't recognized, but I'm sure your support meant a lot to him. I was never able to actually do anything for him. That's why I want to help you, Miyo-chan. Miyo-chan, helping you is like atoning for my mistakes. Thank you very much. He's lucky to have you as his best friend. If only there were more understanding people like you in the military's upper echelon. It's very regrettable to think that my grandfather's life might have been different. The old man closed his eyes and paused for a moment. Openly developing what WMDs is pretty iffy in post-war Japan, though. That'd be pretty iffy. They're under some close scrutiny in the immediate aftermath of the war. That wouldn't go well. He closed his eyes and paused for a moment, and shortly after that, he looked into the distance. Spoke. Actually, that isn't true at all. The higher-ups were interested in Takano's discovery. Oh? I never heard that before. Why didn't they support his research? Something came up and they couldn't let him look into Hinamizawa syndrome. Only a few of the top brass and myself knew the reason. Now that all but myself have passed, I think I should tell you, Miyo, since you're carrying on his work. What came up? What was it? Takano believed until this day her grandfather's research was ridiculed by everyone, which was the reason why it never gained recognition. Her grandfather asked the military for funding so he could uncover the secret during the war. But just like the old man said earlier, the military wanted an instant-acting weapon. That's why they weren't interested. That's what she had believed. But as it turned out, the military actually showed an interest after all. Before I go on, I need to explain about the Kwantung Army in Manchuria at the time. While the Kwantung Army was stationed in Manchuria, opinions were divided on whether to advance our forces north or south. At the time, Japan had troops in Manchuria, but opinions were divided on advancing north to deter the Soviet Union, or south to expand our territory, securing resources. With the Union and its predecessor Russia being a landlocked, frozen nation, they had long yearned for an ice-free port that wouldn't freeze over in winter. They made numerous attempts to expand their territory southward, too. Those expansionist policies were said to be the cause of the Russo-Japanese War. Yep, absolutely. In the history books, it said Japan won the Russo-Japanese War, but it was actually a draw, ending in peace signed at the Treaty of Portsmouth. Yeah, that's about accurate. Both sides simply set aside their spears after mutually exhausting their forces. It wasn't like Russia capitulated and offered a complete surrender. And as a result, the perception of the Russian threat continued to smolder. Good thing, too, Russia did most of the fucking heavy lifting. In fact, I believe Russia actually did a land invasion, right? Like, right around the same time that the bombs were dropped? If I recall correctly. If I recall correctly, they did a surprise attack and declared war at the same time. And we're taking a shit ton of land from the Japanese, contributing to their surrender. The things you learn. The things you learn. First you get Hiroshima'd. First you get invaded by Russia in a surprise attack, then you get Hiroshima. Yeah, it's a rough time to know you're losing all your land holdings at once. Losing all your reclaimed territory and getting and a new super weapon's been developed. Rough times. Yeah, the threat of the Russians, definitely a real problem. Later, the Russian Empire was overthrown by a revolution, but Japan was unable to shake the threat that the new Soviet Union would advance south. According to the history books, Japan went south. They signed the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact and abandoned the northern advance, and then the Soviets completely betrayed them like they do everyone else. As a result, when the Great Patriot War began, the Soviet Union was able to respond to pressure on the German front by pouring in their eastern forces. Though the Germans managed to lay siege to Moscow, the Soviets launched a counteroffensive to reverse the tides of the war. Even with the Neutrality Pact, the Soviets couldn't tell if Japan would attack them at some point. Because of that threat, the Soviets had to leave some forces in the east, and they weren't able to devote enough troops to the German front. What do you mean, not enough? For starters, the Soviets forged the German-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact too, yet Germany broke it and attacked the Soviet Union. To make matters worse, Japan and Germany forged a military alliance. With all those factors in play, the Soviets couldn't trust Japan to uphold their Neutrality Pact. Ironically, the Soviet Union was the one who broke the pact, but I won't go into that now. See, like I said, the Soviets fucking broke it. The Russians invaded anyway. Exactly. Hitler signed the Tripartite Act because he expected Japan to keep the Soviets' other front in check, but ultimately Japan abandoned the North. With the superior German offensive, many supported the idea of waiting and watching it play out. Yeah, can you imagine fighting on that many fronts at the same time as Japan? That's very aggressive. They believed that even if we did advance north, it would be after Germany conquered Moscow. Yeah, fighting a war in China, a war in all of Southeastern Asia, and fighting Australia and the Americans at the same time, as well as Russia, is a very aggressive play. That plan was exposed to Sorge, and the Soviets transferred their heavy tanks from the east border to the German front. Alright. Yep. That secured Germany's defeat at Moscow, and the Germans began seeing a string of defeats, starting with the Battle of Kursk. Is that actually an accurate assessment? I don't actually know that one. That is that the Soviets found out that Japan wasn't advancing and redistributed all their forces from the Japanese front to the German front, resulting in Germany's defeat in Moscow? I don't actually know if that one's true. I assume it's something like that. I assume that's plausible, right? It seems plausible. There's a lot of truth in here, but we're playing a fucking video game, so like, who the fuck knows if the history is accurate or if this assessment is valid? It's a turning point in history, right? During the Cold War, the Soviet Union was recognized as a global power, but at least in 1940, the Kwantung Army didn't think it was a particular threat. Japan earned a victory with the Russo-Japanese War, and they took the new Soviet Union government lightly, assuming it wouldn't be stable after overthrowing the Russian Empire. That underestimation was corrected after the Nomonhan incident in 1941. After several fierce short-term battles with the Soviet Union's advanced mechanized corps that led to great losses, the Kwantung Army realized they shouldn't fight the Soviets, and that inclined Japan towards the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact. But at the very least, up until the incident, the Kwantung Army was strongly conscious of the Soviets and divided on advancing north or south. Thanks to that, there were voices advising caution, suggesting we avoid all-out war with China to shore up our forces against the Soviets. That would have been a good call. But the Sino-Japanese War broke out after the Marco Polo Bridge incident, right? July 1937. Japanese and Chinese armies were staring at each other across the Lugo Bridge in Beijing. It was the middle of the night on July 7th. The Chinese army fired on the Japanese army in training, and they engaged in combat. This triggered the long Sino-Japanese War. Yes, according to historical records, the incident triggered the Sino-Japanese War, but with opinions divided on advancing north or south, the army was divided over a full-scale confrontation with China. In fact, we even received orders from General Staff Headquarters to resolve the matter quietly before the incident grew bigger. This is going into first-person perspective, so I assume this is conjecture, at best, and probably fan fiction, on average. We're not going to go into words. Those supporting the Northern Advance wanted to settle the Battle of Lugo Bridge quietly, insisting the conflict with China was pointless in light of their anti-Soviet strategy. However, those on the mainland supporting the Southern Advance used this incident as cause to dispatch more troops to China. They enacted hard policies against China, and thus the bridge incident became the trigger for Japan and China to enter all-out war. After that, and their bitter struggles in the Nomonhan incident, Japan greatly revised their Soviet strategy. They signed the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact and secured the route for their southern advance. The Sino-Japanese War got worse and worse. For a naval power fighting a land war deep in the heart of China, that is a super questionable strategy. If the Marco Polo Bridge incident hadn't happened, it's possible history would have gone very differently. Maybe we could have ended up in a war with them anyway. However, if the South faction didn't get that chance, the authorities would have kept restraining the Soviet Union, and the Soviets would have had to divide their forces between East and West. They might have changed history. Maybe Germany could have invaded Moscow, and Japan could have gone to Siberia. The map could have been very different today. Germany wouldn't necessarily have won if it succeeded in taking Moscow. Yeah, that's true. England's keeping its strength on the other side of the Dover Strait, and the US is poised to enter the conflict. Napoleon once occupied Moscow, but in the end he couldn't beat their winter and had to withdraw. One of those ifs, huh? The Axis might have won the war. It's possible the gunshot from the bridge incident changed the tide of history. Both sides had different opinions who fired the shot. According to the Japanese, a Chinese soldier fired, and a Japanese soldier got too close to the Chinese camp. However, the Chinese side claimed the shot was a conspiracy invented by the Japanese military. The shot was fired, even though no one knew who actually pulled the trigger. It sparked the war. That's true. Although, judging from who's most likely motivated to start the conflict, it's more likely that it seems plausible that it could be Japanese agents trying to incite a war, as they're very aggressive and ambitious at the time. Yes, that's what the history books say. But Koizumi-sensei, what does that have to do with my grandfather? In the Marco Polo Bridge incident, a shot was fired at a unit that was training in the middle of the night. Everyone was summoned for a roll call. They were missing one soldier. This soldier came back later, and it was said he was sent as a messenger and got too close to the Chinese camp. By the way, did you know that soldier was from Hinamizawa? What? Really? Oh boy, here we go. Takano-kun was talking about Hinamizawa syndrome. He said the soldier from Hinamizawa could suddenly fall into a deranged state. And we realized the soldier from the Marco Polo Bridge incident was in fact from Hinamizawa. What about the first shot fired? I don't know the truth. I think it's possible a soldier with a terminal stage of Hinamizawa syndrome might have fired the shot. That soldier was killed in the incident, and since there was no record of it, nobody knows exactly how he died. The Japanese side claimed the Chinese fired at them, and negotiated with that in mind. Just a scant few days after the incident, Japan demanded an apology from the Chinese, and as a show of force, dispatched 3 divisions of reinforcements. The Chinese side was, of course, opposed to that. The situation escalated at once. If research into Hinamizawa syndrome continued, the higher-ups thought it would negatively influence the Japanese army's claims. Oof, that's a big oof. So they didn't want to research it because it would make them look really fucking bad. After they started a war and killed, like, hundreds of thousands of people. Yeah, that's pretty questionable. That's pretty rough. So in order to avoid the risk of traversing the political gray zone, they rejected Takano's research. So because of that, they refused to even consider my grandfather's research long after the war ended? Bro, Japan doesn't even like admitting all the terrible stuff they did during the war? Yeah, that seems reasonable. This is a plausible explanation for how the world is the way it is today. An interesting conspiracy / alternate theory. And I think it follows. I think it like could hold water in this setting. That works. The war is over now, but there's still some conflicts there regarding historical recognition. Even if Takano didn't mean it for it to happen, his research into Hinamizawa syndrome, if it became public, it might cause a resurgence of quarrels over the long-ended war. Certain authorities were afraid of that, so they made sure his research was ignored even after the war. I was long warned not to aid him in any way myself. Takano tried to remain calm, but she couldn't stop herself from grimacing. She just found out the real reason why her grandfather's research was ignored, because of secret maneuvers by political masterminds. It's always political masterminds. Those masterminds feared it so much, ironically, that meant they acknowledged the importance of his research. Takano was saddened and frustrated to no end by her grandfather's lonely life. However, they're all dead by now. I'm the only one who knows about this. If Takano was still alive, I was going to apologize to him and give him my unconditional support, but he's no longer around. So I apologize to you and offer to give you my full support instead. Are you sure? Wouldn't research into the syndrome dredge up those same subjects again? It's different now. Besides, research into the syndrome may produce more than a mere local disease. Depending on your research, post-war Japan might gain a trump card that makes it a world power once more. The times have changed then. That's right. Unfortunately, Takano didn't live long enough to see that tide change, but he has you to continue his research, so as long as I'm alive, I'll give you my full support. I promised to help Takano, but because of various things I couldn't do anything. So I want to make up for that as long as I'm alive. I think that's the least I can do for the man who called me his best friend. Rizumi-sensei, thank you so much. Oh, don't mention it. I'm glad I was able to tell you everything before I died. Anyway, until I'm gone, I'll make sure you get everything you need, okay? If anything comes up, be sure to let me know. I'll do anything for you. Takano couldn't even imagine what kind of bond this old man and her grandfather had between them. So this random old rich guy's just like, fucking take all my money. I need to fucking spend this shit. And I'm feeling so guilty I didn't give your grandfather the money he deserved. Thanks to that bond, Takano was able to gain a powerful supporter. Wait, didn't the guy say they were from different generations? Is this old man younger? I thought this old man was older than her grandfather. Maybe he died of, like, a disease or something early on, or, like, also died in a train crash like her parents? Who knows? Tears welled up in Takano's eyes as she gave him an emotional look, but in her mind, she was practically dancing at the promise of the old man's full support. The old man and Takano both bowed at the same time to show each other their appreciation. Once that was done, the old man became a little more serious. After that far too lengthy preamble, he finally said what he really wanted to tell her. So there you have it. This is what I wanted to say. Hinamizawa syndrome has the potential power to make history. It may even twist the fate of our country. So keep that in mind and be careful with your research. After the proprietor finished serving the food, she bowed and left. And what did she do with this research? Didn't she just kill everyone associated with it? The room was very tastefully put together, reminding them of a tea ceremony room. While it was sparsely decorated, quite a bit of money had obviously gone into it. This was a very famous Japanese restaurant where many high-up officials and other important people held secret meetings. Takano was there, accompanied by about 5 gentlemen. Damn. Alright, 5 dudes? 5 dudes at once? Alright, Takano. You do your thing, I guess. She was sitting slightly further away from the men. They were clearly in a much more important position than she was. One of the men, wearing an expensive double-breasted suit, told Takano not to be so nervous. Relax, Takano-san. What we read is very interesting to us. I can't believe this research was just sitting there for dozens of years. It is surprising. I thought most of the research on BC weapons the military conducted during the war failed to bear fruit, and nothing was left after the US military confiscated even the fundamental research. Heard this research was barely even glanced at by the top brass. I see, so that's why nobody knew about it and GHQ didn't investigate it. In that sense, at least, it was truly fortunate. Interesting, Takano's research would be succeeded by a different Takano-san. I suppose that's fate. It's like the deceased is using your body to complete his life's work. Maybe that's true. I feel a mysterious connection to him, too. Takano adored Takano Hifumi and called him grandfather, but she hadn't revealed the relationship to others. Subtle, isn't it? She realized it wouldn't be beneficial for people to think she was involving personal feelings in her continuing Dr. Takano's research. So publicly, once she had exchanges with Takano Hifumi, and after his death discovered his research documents with his remains, and chose to carry it on. Alright, so she's lying to people about why she's doing it. At least that's how the story goes. She just found the research and thought it was useful. Well then, what do you think? The defense agency was very interested. According to Nakagawa-kun, the defense agency's Terminal Research and Development Institute showed great interest. They offered to sponsor the research, too. Oh, that's wonderful. Congratulations, Takano. Didn't she have literal millions of dollars given to her like 2 seconds ago? Why does she need more money? Thank you very much. Here's what they said. There's a research council for the next generation deterrence being led by experts from different ministries. One of those is called the Alphabet Project. Have you heard of it? There is no way she'd know about something like that. But it was possible for these nationalists to research something dangerous without citizens knowing about it. Society forms something like a web made of connections between people. This is interesting, okay? People who hold hands with each other, who hold the same ideas, and end up knitting a net. Of course, some nets are well known, but there are secret ones too. Yeah? There was no way of guessing how the men at this meeting were connected. A society involving research into deterrent weapons for the next generation. The Alphabet Project. With those words, it was possible to imagine what it might entail. Deterrent weapons. That usually refers to nuclear technology. Weapons are usually used to destroy enemies, however, the general idea of deterrence is very different. The assumption is they won't actually be used against anyone. Nuclear weapons are largely used as a threat to prevent enemy invasion. Yep, that's right. Both the US and Soviet possess large stockpiles, keeping each other in check, but they'll never actually use them, because if they did, there'd be a nuclear war, and both countries would be destroyed. So they're like a legendary weapon you never draw. Of course, that last resort only works because both sides have them. If one side lacks them, they lose all military negotiation power. In other words, nations without nukes are powerless before nuclear states. Sorry, Ukraine. It can't be true. Japan abandoned nukes and still functions as a nation today. Or so some people may be thinking, but they're wrong. Japan abandoned nukes but lies under the nuclear umbrella by allying itself with America, just like most of NATO. I added that bit myself. It means the nation functions thanks to America's nukes. However, it also means we must resign ourselves to forever being a vassal of America. In order for Japan to escape that and become a powerful nation equal to America, it must possess its own deterrence arms and step out of that nuclear umbrella. That society must have been put together by experts who believe in that ideal. Given that, even the name Alphabet Project makes sense. Nuclear weapons are weapons of mass destruction. However, weapons of mass destruction aren't always nuclear. They include biological weapons, chemical weapons, atomic, biological, chemical. The initials of those 3 words make up ABC. And that's why weapons of mass destruction are sometimes called ABC weapons. Today I learned WMDs are sometimes called ABC weapons. Or at least, in the 80s they are. That's cool. I won't go into WMDs that don't belong to those three categories. Alphabet, ABC. In other words, Alphabet Project must be a code for research into WMDs. As it happened, this guess of Takano's was correct. Pirates, Japan should possess nuclear arms. We established ourselves as a peace-loving nation after the war. After our vast international contributions, we've been recognized as a permanent member of the UN. Yet until we possess nuclear arms, we won't be recognized as a proper nation. That is the long-held desire of post-war Japan. Exactly. However, realistically, thanks to nuclear non-proliferation treaties, the major nations hold a monopoly on them. And worse, our domestic public opinion is quite allergic to them, so foreign and domestic pressures make implementing them impossible. Biological and chemical weapons are sometimes known as the poor man's nuke. Small countries that can't own nuclear weapons already started research into that kind of weaponry. Takano, please don't misunderstand us. The purpose of our research isn't to obtain a biological weapon. Our goal is to prevent such weapons from coming into Japan from other countries. This research is into self-defense. I want you to understand that. That's right. We're just learning to defend ourselves. Of course. I'm aware of that. Takano hated this Japanese tendency to make excuses, but she didn't let it show in her face. We're researching a unique researching a unique biological weapon that only shows up in Japan for the purposes of learning about biological weapons that could be sent into Japan. Definitely not using this weapon. Remember what they said, they already saw the value in using this research towards biological weaponry. However, in truth, that was an excuse as well. If they actually wanted to research biological weapons, it'd be faster to research diseases like smallpox and anthrax instead of an unidentified disease like Inamizawa syndrome. It wasn't quite right to say they were interested in it as a biological weapon. In other words, Takano needed a powerful sponsor who could back her up with funding, personnel, and a facility to conduct her research. Wait, how did that follow? Those two sentences didn't follow at all. Okay. She used her connections and turned the old men behind the government and economy, reaching out to each of them and getting them to pull out funding from the defense agency under the excuse of its application towards biological weaponry. That's the truth. Therefore, her project isn't officially recognized by the defense agency. To be exact, the people who control the defense agency knew about it. These masterminds diverted funding from the defense agency to the Alphabet Project, and then they pushed for Takano's research to be a part of it. She gets her funding, the influencers get to drain public funds through kickbacks, everyone wins! Considering that, it was doubtful this project was genuinely about researching next-generation deterrence weapons. It was probably an excuse for the masterminds to funnel money into their own pockets. And what great! We got some embezzlement, we got some theft, and she's getting a fucking secret weapon project. Well, those complicated matters didn't matter to Takano. Whatever those old men and their influencers were planning wasn't her business. As long as she could get funding to her research, that was enough. Either way, Takano found her sponsor. One of the biggest organizations around too. This had always been her grandfather's dream. Takano was trying to stay calm, but she was about to jump up and down in excitement. I'm finally getting the opportunity to research biological weapons. Nakagawa-kun says that once the research gets underway, he doesn't mind buying it out. Although it's still incomplete, he definitely sees potential in it. You're absolutely right. This research is only halfway complete. Sufficient funding, facilities, and personnel will be indispensable. About that. Here's where negotiations start, but apparently they want to take this research on in its entirety. I feel bad saying this, but I think the burden is too much for you to bear alone. I don't even know what degree Takano ostensibly has. Hearing that put the damper on her ecstasy. I'm not trying to make money off this. I'm working as a researcher purely out of intellectual curiosity. What I need is a sponsor, and what they seek are results. That was the relationship I hoped to establish. Takano realized she was talking rather breathlessly, so she tried to calm herself down. Either way, they're backing the research. They'd be backing the research. Considering they were hoping for results that merit the budget, they probably feel Takano's too young to handle it. I know. You've been working on this for a long time, and you don't want anyone to just grab it from you, right? I understand. Of course, we've already informed them that, so here's the compromise we came with. First, we start your research as an offshoot of the Alphabet Project. Once you'll have the board of directors' approval, you'll be given official funding. We'll have you participate in the project as an associate researcher, and you'll take part in the research that way. If she wanted their funding, she'd have to fall under their authority. course. So far, no objections. However, the Research Society listed a few conditions in exchange for funding. First, as was mentioned, to entrust the position of lead researcher to an individual that's skilled and talented in this field of research. I hate to interject. Who would be more knowledgeable about this than me, other than the late Dr. Takano, of course? Now, calm down, Takano. I understand how you feel. Still, how is this any different from selling my research to this individual? Not what we discussed at all. Whoa, calm down, Takano. This cunning old man didn't miss sight of the faint leak of anger that crossed Takano's expression. They gave evasive laughs as if remarking how immature she was if she still let her emotions show over such a little thing. But they weren't laughing to look down on her. On the contrary, they were trying to tell her to wait until the end. Of course, we'll make sure you get your way. Koizumi-sensei told me to take good care of you. Do you think I would just ignore you after he told me that? Oh, don't worry. Let me work things out. I'll make sure you'll be happy. What do you mean? Well, you see, I get to select the person in charge. Everyone chortled except Takano, and after a moment she joined in. In other words, he meant he'd find just the right person. The defense agency suggested finding an expert to lead the project because they didn't feel comfortable with her. However, Takano's sponsor was the one tasked to find such a person. Convenient, isn't it? And in that moment, Takano realized it. How wonderful it is to have such a powerful backer. They're like, we're not comfortable with her, find someone else. And he's like, oh well, I'll find someone else, alright. Let me work it out. I'll find some candidates for you. All you have to do is pick the one you think would be most suitable. Takano felt better after hearing that. While she wouldn't be the official head, she would end up leading it from the shadows. Of course, she's not an expert per se. Does she happen to agree? Having a partner would actually be beneficial. Give me some time to talk to the other end. I'll make sure you'll be happy with the outcome. Please just be patient for a little while. I understand. Thank you for everything. Oh, and by the way, it's not just the defense agency. Nagata from the Ministry of Health and Welfare is willing to help you too. He introduced me to Ito-kun from the National Research of Infectious Diseases. He's willing to help you with equipment and other tech. Really? Thank you so much. Haha, this is a national project, isn't it? Congratulations, Takano. It's all because of your effort and the deceased Takano's hard work. Oh no. It's all because of Dr. Takano. I haven't done anything yet. Being humble is a good virtue, just like Koizumi told me. You're a truly nice person. No wonder he adores you. Anyway, he wants you to join the defense agency. Luckily, you have a doctor's license, right? We'll secure your position as a medical officer of the TRDI. Can I be a public servant? I wasn't expecting that. All the organizations that are involved in Alphabet Project are public institutions. The SDF is interested in the research as well, and they're making strong requests to dispatch some of their personnel too. Depending on the circumstances, you might be treated as an SDF member. Well, just think of those as officials squabbling over jurisdiction. Try to stand above those officials. You'll need your own official position. No matter what, we'll make sure you'll be happy. Don't worry about a thing. I understand. I'll let you work things out, but knowing Dr. Takano's research was once rejected by the old Japanese military, it's hard to believe they're interested in it now. Well, that couldn't be stopped. With the war situation, the Japanese military saw something with an immediate effect. Something that could turn the war around. I don't think they were looking down on his research. That wasn't true. Takano already knew that confession from the old man. She exhaled, and to her it was like the meeting in front of her was happening somewhere far away. She's achieved her victory. She's getting her research done. She longed for this day to come and worked so hard to reach it. Finally, her grandfather and his research were attaining recognition. This was the day she dreamed of. She was frightened just imagining it might be an actual dream. True joy can't be felt at once. It's often a delayed reaction. Takano thought that must be what she's feeling. Surely, right? I imagine you'll be given a field officer's rank. Since you'll be second in command, you'll likely be a major. Oh, that's wonderful. Major Takano, huh? I am a little jealous. As a man, I wish I had a rank like that. Oh boy. Major Takano. A major? What does that signify? Well, it's reasonably high in the rank system of the SDF. It's like a sub-manager at a company, I guess. That'll be your rank once the project gets underway. Equivalent to a lieutenant commander in the old Japanese military. What a coincidence. Dr. Takano was also a lieutenant commander in the old military. Takano remembered suddenly. They were right. Her grandfather had been a lieutenant commander in the Japanese military. Everything she'd done until today was so she could continue her grandfather's research. Now everything fell into place. She has his old title, She got everything. She's even given the same rank as her grandfather. Yeah, exactly. She always believed that succeeding his research would be proof they had a tight bond, tighter than blood, and now she'd even be the same rank as him. This is fate, she thought. Maybe even a message from Grandpa? It must have been a shout of encouragement from heaven. Proof she inherited not only the research, but his will as well. Congratulations, Takano. You can do your research. You can do your research. He couldn't help but feel a sense of destiny for attaining the rank of major. Huh? Finally here. Nobody else could hear her say that, but her grandfather in heaven sure could. That's what Takano believed. She'd only come so far. There were still a lot of things to do for this research to be recognized as a great work. Otherwise, her grandfather wouldn't become a god. She couldn't become one either. I mean, if you cure a disease, or you could attain immortality. That's not wrong. You must become a god. That was in her grandfather's will. I was unable to do so. That line preceded it. It was her grandfather's dying wish. He entrusted it to her. All of his research. A god can't be physically brought back to life. A god is made in the hearts of the people who remain alive. Her grandfather will live on in her heart. His exploits will be known to many, and all the scholars will fight to read his documents. To steal them from each other. And they'll learn about Hifumi Takano, who began his research during the war. They will learn that nobody understood him, and he ended up devoting his lonely life to his research. So is this her motive now? Her motive, for reference, is her grandfather's will telling her to become a god. I'm curious how she reached the conclusion that just killing people and ending the whole disease concept would work. Because now no one even knew the document existed other than some military dudes, and now that the disease is extinguished, no one will look at it again, and it will never come to light, so she'll never achieve her godhood, correct? Is that not how it goes? So let's think about this. It's permanently top secret, it's never revealed. That is the opposite of what she wants, is it not? Like, why did she want things to go this way? Her immortality is not achieved. Her immortality is not achieved by this. I mean, it's sort of achieved, but there's no hard evidence that it's her. I guess like, a bunch of people die, and then, like, 50 years later, nobody's gonna give a shit, and they'll be like, oh, a gas explosion killed some people. That fucking sucked. Or not a gas explosion, some unfortunate gas exploded down a mountain and fucking killed like 20 people. Like, that's a list of natural disasters and not like act of God. I guess you could consider a natural disaster an act of God, but I don't feel like that's a way to achieve your immortality, because not only is your name and your grandfather's name not stapled on it, but I mean, most people aren't going to remember that. Hell, I'm going to be completely honest. If you ask me to remember more than like 5 hurricane names, I don't think I could do that. And hurricane season happens all the fucking time, right? Like, I wonder if... I think Danny lives in Florida. I wonder if he remembers the name of every single hurricane that's come to the state. Like, there's like a million fucking disasters. Nobody's gonna remember the list of all of them unless they're like obsessed with disasters, which seems silly. I mean, obsessions with like small obscure things happen anywhere, but I mean, if you want to do that, you could easily attain infamy by making YouTube videos, for example. You don't even need to be super popular, you just need a handful of people who are interested in you to remember you, right? I wouldn't be like, oh, I'm a god now. I mean, I am godlike, but that's arrogance talking here, not the reality of things. Right. Learn about him one day. They'll extol his grand achievement. In what? What's his grand achievement? His grand achievement is curing a disease. That might be a decent achievement, or a reasonable one. Probably, or it might be killing a bajillion people with your research. Oh, both of them could be huge achievements. I guess if you kill enough people, you'll be immortalized by countless people. That is quite the achievement, but I don't think the secret village extermination strat is the quite the right one. I guess we'll find out why she went this way in the end, but my current perspective, it seems unusual. In any case, ladies and gentlemen, we're reaching end of things. I think it's time we wrap things up for the night.